Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for watching. Welcome to our Strategic Planning Governing Committee meeting. If I could ask you all to rise for the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. There's lots of material on the back table if you didn't get a chance to grab it, and I will turn it over to Dr. Scanlon.
I think it might be nice if we just did some introductions. It's been a while since this committee was together, so I think everyone knows who I am. I'll go to my right.
Jeff Carlson, Deputy Superintendent.
I have to hit the button.
You do to talk, yes.
Michelle Drucker, parent member.
Brian Latham, parent member.
Thank you. Linda Pomerantz, President of the Sub-Teachers Union.
Virginia Heslin from the Clerical Union.
Tanya Horowitz, Assistant Principal at Arrowhead and Pre-K Coordinator. Feel like I'm going to sing a song or something.
Corinne Keene, Building Principal at Jolinas Junior High School.
Anthony Polera, Music.
Nushin Corbisero, SEA at Arrowhead.
Carrie Galini, Director of E&L and World Language.
Jay Zem, parent member.
Victoria Kwasnick, community member.
Daniel Fody, community member.
Sharon Arvidsson, nurses.
Eric Gustafson, I teach 4th grade at Setauket, and I'm the elementary vice president of TVTA.
Sarah Depp, I teach science at Murphy, and I'm welfare secretary for TVTA.
Dean Costas, technology teacher at Jolinas, and TVTA secondary vice president.
Brian Pickford, president of Three Village Teachers Association.
Jonathan Cornish, parent.
Ingrid Germano, district clerk.
Brian Biscari, Assistant Superintendent for Educational Services.
And Sue Rosenzweig from the Board of Ed.
So thank you all for coming again. We have a presentation for you. I know it may seem a little long, and as Sue mentioned, there are some things on the table over there. There's the agenda. There's the Strategic Planning Committee, the Start Time Committee piece that we did last week at the Start Time Subcommittee. And there is also this presentation. Well, actually, I don't know if we did this. Did you guys hit this presentation? No, you have this presentation. This is the data presentation that was done by Laura Pimentel, our CIO, at a recent board meeting. I also included something from the Suffolk County School Superintendents Association, which is a pamphlet. We're actually going to post this information on the website as well, so that everyone has access to it. There's some very interesting facts about our region, Long Island, and here that might be applicable to some of the things that we're discussing this evening. So I'm going to get right into it. The first part we're starting with tonight is a recap of where we are. So just so we are clear, that the purpose of bringing back the governing committee tonight is not to re-vote on what was already decided. This committee last year decided to move forward with the 9th grade, moving to the high school, and the 6th grade moving to a middle school model. The real crux that we're going to get to at the end part of this presentation is the Start Time Subcommittee's recommendation to this committee, which this committee gets to discuss and decide whether it's going to forward that recommendation on to the Board of Education. So just want to go through some details so we all are refreshed on some of the things we were covering last year. So first part is plan, survey, and needs. So one of the things we talked about was why are we planning strategically? So we looked at things such as the alignment with the state standards. And remember, we talked about how it's a P5, 6, 8, 9, 12 model now with the state. Attempts to realign the district were conducted in the past at least 3 times, according to my records in the superintendent's office. As early as 1981 was the first one. And that's back when the district had about over 8,000 students in it. And just couldn't do it because of the size. We just couldn't fit. It wasn't that we ideally didn't want to do it. It was ideally we didn't have the space to do it. So sadly, what does that lead us to now is because our enrollment has declined to the point where we could fit the populations in the respective secondary buildings at this point. The need to reallocate some of our resources for the changing demographics, and we're going to show you some of those charts that came from the presentation on the data. We embedded it in this document too for your edification. And for those of you watching at home, we are going to be posting this presentation after the board meeting next week, so everyone can take a look and see. Then we're going to go into some of the costs and just talk a little bit about the tax cap, which impacts what we can and cannot spend. It's not an unlimited pot of money to do any changes with any of these things. So if something goes in, and technically, the expression that Mr. Carlson always uses, something has to come out in order to be able to maintain that tax cap component. So this chart just shows you our enrollment from 2014 to now. We are starting to level off. The unofficial totals this year are about 55-14. So we're a little bit smaller than last year, but elementary enrollment's starting to level off. But the leveling off is not in the 500, 600, 800, 700 range as it used to be. It's more in the 400 range. The junior class right now is about 515 students. When they go to next year, they're going to be the last of the classes above 500. This shows the breakdown by each of the elementary, secondary, broken down junior high school and high school levels. Also, this is in this document if you want to take a look at those charts. Elementary is a little bit higher than last year, but we see the secondary continues to decline. It will also start to level off once those elementary numbers start to move into the high school. This chart just shows our student demographic groupings. So the number of students with disabilities is still hovering around the same percentages. However, that center line there, the economically disadvantaged, has certainly grown. From 2012 to now, it's gone up by about 10%. So that is the new trend, and it's continuing. We continue to see that have an impact on us. Our E&L population, Ms. Galini is here tonight, who also represents E&L as well, has increased over the past few years. I thought this was an interesting piece to show the committee, once again, about how we are changing. There are 29 different languages spoken in our district, which represent among 286 students. The map here you see is the predominant languages of those areas. So Spanish and Chinese continue to be that, but you can see all the others that are present in our schools. Students' birth countries, we are now from 51 different birth countries, representing 243 students. So again, this cluster of nations shows you where all the different places our students are coming from. And these numbers are increasing. So getting into a little bit of what we did. So last year, we did the survey of administrators, faculty, staff, parents, students, community members. And what came out of that survey was the majority of people felt that we should move the 6th and the 9th grade. What we reviewed was the options available to us at the time. So the Strategic Planning Governing Committee recommended making the move to the Board of Education for the 2024-25 school year. Implementation was delayed, though, so the administration requested to move the plan out for one more year to give us a little bit more time to work out the logistics. And that includes the 9th grade schedule, what the 6th grade configuration would look like, the configuration of our elementary schools, and to allow this component that we did earlier this year, which is the start time needs survey that was conducted. If you don't remember what the four options were, I actually can recite them from just sheer memory. I have dreams about them every night. We put out all four of them. The first one, and to make sure that everyone was aware, the first option we gave the community in A was stay exactly in our current configuration. Stay as is, no changes whatsoever. 5 elementary schools being pre-K to 6, 2 junior high schools, 7 through 9, and the high school 10 through 12. No changes whatsoever. The second option, option B, was to move just the 6th and the 9th grade. Option C, which we threw out there, was just only to move the 9th grade, not to move the 6th grade at all. Just move 9th grade up, have 2 middle schools that are 7 and 8. And the fourth option, was the Princeton plan. So that's where we would have 2 primary schools, 2 intermediate schools, 2 middle schools, and 1 high school. So recalling what the end result of those surveys were, keeping our current option, option A, we have the stats on each of the groups, the parent, guardians, staff, students, and community members. We asked them to list these in preferential order. First preference by all of these groups, the majority of them, was to move the 9th and the 6th grade. Option C has obviously less support, and option D, I get it, no one wants the Princeton plan, all right? So that we kind of squashed that one completely. However, I just want to remind everyone, from this group especially, and from those watching at home, if we're talking about money, which we're not always talking about money, but if we were talking about money, the Princeton plan saved the most money. So that was just the option if everyone was thinking about that again. So all the other options save some money, but not as much as that particular plan. So what is needed to move to 9th grade and 6th grade? So we started taking a look at some things with an internal review committee. One of the things we looked at was our mental health supports. So if we move the 9th grade to the high school, even though the population at the high school would be 1,778 students at the time of 25-26, which is much lower than we were about 8 or 9 years ago with about 1,900 students at the school, we would want to try to keep the ratios of guidance counselors to students lower. So we were proposing to put in 3 additional guidance counselors. The 6th grade, coming from the elementary school, presently does not, and no, there is no FLES program in the elementary level. When they would come to the junior high school level, now it would be a middle school, they would need languages. So we would need to hire in a range between 3.2 and 3.6. So it's better to go high than to go low, at least, and if we come in under, great. But that would just be able to handle the 6th grade. The majority of our students do take Spanish over the other 2 languages, but we would offer all 3 to all of our students in 6th grade. Staffing would have to be adjusted to the levels to accommodate for the needs in art, health, music, physical education, and science. We would also have to put out a request from among the 6th grade teachers who would want to go with the 6th grade to the middle level. There is no special certification required to teach 6th grade if they only teach 6th grade, if they're an elementary teacher at a middle level. And that was part of our discussions about just housing them with those teachers. So some current 6th grade teachers might want to go up, and some may want to stay back and be an elementary school teacher still. We would work with the union about how we would determine that. But minimally, we were probably looking about 16 teachers, 8 and 8 for each of the 2 junior high schools. We had some thoughts about a house plan model, but working with Ms. Keene and Mr. Ciriola from the 2 junior high schools, and we'll be taking some visitations to some school districts that have 6th grade in the middle school model already and have transitions and what their configurations are. So we're looking at some districts that are comparable to us to make those type of determinations. So just as a tangential point for a moment, even if we decide tonight and this committee makes a recommendation about the start time to the Board of Education, the Board of Education reviews that next week and then votes probably the first meeting in January, that does not mean the work of this committee or all the other subcommittees is over. Certainly not the work of the teachers and the administrators in the district is over. The next year and a half is going to be a lot of work, a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, a lot of moving parts to how this is going to come together. It's going to be a very long process and probably will continue even past the movement date, and whenever, if it's 25, 26, past that first few months even and into the year, to see what's worked, what isn't working, what we need to still do to help support our students and our staff. From a facility standpoint, additional spaces are needed in art, music, and science at the high school. The Internal Review Committee had a splinter-off group of administrators that actually know how to do a master schedule and are highly experienced in that. And what they came up with is a proposal about we could use some rooms. We definitely need other rooms. These 3 areas, art, music, and science, definitely need additional spaces. A total of 16 rooms were proposed. However, in order to have conducted that study, we actually had to take our current numbers in 9 through 12 to see what the request would be. Those numbers are actually, number of students is 147 students more than we currently have in the 7, 8, 9, and 10 grade level. So that's between 6 and 7 sections off. So that takes off that 16 a number of rooms that we need per period. And then these areas in science alone, the accounting for the remaining 9 rooms, 3 of them are in the science area. 2 earth science rooms are needed and a bio room. The rest were 2 music practice rooms, art room, and then just some additional space to give us some flexibility. We spoke about offices also for the 3 additional guidance counselors being incorporated into the guidance suite, reconfiguring the current faculty rooms in English, math, social studies, and world languages back to classrooms in order to gain those spaces back, and reconfigure some unused locker spaces for faculty rooms. We only use about 30% of the lockers in the building right now. It's a sign of the times. Perhaps 9th graders would want to use a lot more lockers. It's not as if we were getting rid of those lockers. We would just reposition them in other areas and other hallways. We had brought up at one point about portables. We cannot put portables at the high school in order to accommodate this. In the curricular areas, the 9th grade offerings moved to Warren Melville High School with the exception of the FACS because of the international foods, because in the past few years, the FACS room was removed from the high school. So we would have to reconfigure our room to bring FACS back for international foods up there. And while we could certainly try to do that within the budget for next year, it might be better to talk about that in the bond projects, which is a separate committee that we formed. The JV sports transportation and time savings for 9th grade might actually help us as well. There's some potential cost savings there. 6th grade provided with middle level courses, including the world languages and middle level requirements such as FACS and technology. And the 9th and 6th grade on par with 75% of their peers in New York State and the United States. 75% of the schools in the country and New York State are middle school 6 through 8 and high school 9 through 12 configurations. We're the only school district left on Long Island with a junior high school, senior high school configuration. So one thing I wanted to emphasize here, we had brought up this chart last year about capacity, and there's words of caution with that because when we look at capacity about how many people can fit in there, that's based upon the square footage and dividing it by the number of students that could potentially fit in those areas. And what our current enrollments are in both elementary and secondary. But that analysis only provides part of the picture. Due to a lot of the special programs which we pride ourselves on in this district, special education programs, all of our specials, art and music, a lot of our elective programs, we use a lot of these spaces. So while this chart shows one thing, the chart that Laura Pimentel provided us last year at around this same time shows that we are by far using much more of those spaces for those other areas. When you have students with special needs, you need spaces for OT, PT, speech. We need reading services, math AS services. So those take up locations in the buildings. So we just need to be cognizant of that because I know there's a lot of discussion in the community about, well, just close the school. That could be part of this, but there are other things that it's not an easy, fix immediately to do that. For our secondary configuration, just wanted to show our current enrollment is 2,818. Our enrollment in 2012 was 3,806. The Warren Melville High School enrollment as of right now is 1,453. It's estimated by 25-26, with the 9th grade coming up, it's going to be around 1,778. Just to give ourselves a window here, our enrollment in 2012 at Warren Melville High School was 1,903. So with 3 grade levels, we had far more students than we would 2 years from now if we moved the 9th grade up. Oh. All right. So costs of moving 9th grade to Warren Melville High School, it's approximately about $2 million to do this. And that's capital improvements that could be in the budget. There's currently $1.4 million in the capital budget, so about to go to $2 million, it's about a $600,000 increase in that area. It's outside the cap, just to remind everyone. So it's not, that money is not in the cap itself. That's outside the cap. Now, something could happen like the roof falling in at Setauket and throw everything off again, like it did this year. We had that money put in for certain things, but we hope that that doesn't happen again. And we're trying to, our facilities department is making sure that we're taking a look at a lot of different areas. But that's a whole other conversation at the bond committee level about what's going on there. In order for us to be able to meet an August of 2025 deadline to get everything ready, we desperately need to get started in January. So this means that the drawings from the architects about the different configurations at the high school, what needs to be put into place so SCD would approve those and get it back to us, and we can start the construction or reconstruction in those areas. So this has to get to the board and move forward at that point in time. Every day we delay puts this back even further. So elementary configuration. So some items to consider here. With the higher needs of students, special education, E&L, and general education, we have requirements for PPS and A&L services. These are mandated services. We cannot get around them. We have ratio requirements within classes, support services, and overall class size at elementary levels that we need to address. So We cut about 30 staff members last year for this year's budget. We took a heavy hit in the elementary level particularly. We had some major increases in some schools. We did our best to try to mitigate that. But at one point, we have actually come down to reducing and restructuring in areas like administration in order to be able to hire more teachers to accommodate what we need in the classrooms. Another piece that has been brought up is the universal pre-K, which we'll get into in a moment, and closure or repurposing of an elementary school, which some folks have said we should be redistricting or shifting populations in order to accomplish. So elementary enrollment. So currently we're at 2702. 2012 we were at 3,416. So it's about 700 students less than we were literally almost 10 years ago in the same environment. Elementary enrollment for universal pre-K, just to give you an example. And notice this chart shows the 6th grade not there. So it's hard to estimate what a pre-K program, a full UPK program would look like. Because you really don't know if parents would send them, especially if the state doesn't mandate it. The state doesn't also mandate kindergarten, so our numbers are slightly lower there than they are when they move it to 1st grade, 2nd grade, and so on. This 1st grade is a mandated grade level. So, what we basically did here was just replicated what we had in kindergarten. So whether or not these numbers are solid or whether they go up or down, it basically will try to cover us, at least for the purposes of trying to see what it looks like. So in order to accomplish this, we have 5 pre-K teachers right now. It's a 7.0 increase in staffing there minimally, 13 FTEs in aides. You just have to move a little bit over there, otherwise you'll be in the dark for the rest of the night. So to give you a sense of what that would mean, if we base it upon what the aid level from the state would be for this year, which was $1.4 million for UPK aid, and when you see that posted in Newsday, when they see, oh, we were supposed to get $2.4 million. Well, $1.4 million of that roughly was in pre-K aid. The $1.4 million does not cover would not have covered the full cost of a UPK program this year for us. So it's about $940,000 off in order to do that. If the numbers are lower, certainly that number goes down, but it's about that much money. And as we just said before, if we put that in, something else has to come out in order to accommodate that. So we are aware the current 2030 mandate by the state for having a pre-K program, we already meet with our current pre-K configuration. We do not have to change anything in order to meet that 2030 mandate. 2035 is a different story because 2035 the state's talking about having a requirement for 3-year-olds to be coming to a program. Now that has a tremendous impact on what we're going to need to do at that point in time, what that would look like. And while that may be about 12 years out, there's still a lot of people talking about what that could be. And there's one other factor here, that we live in a community that has a lot of businesses. There are between the Three Village, Smithtown, Middle Country, and Port Jeff area, there are about 29 different programs that offer pre-K, nursery, daycare. If we open up this fully, not that we should have that as a major concern, but it would be a concern for some of the businesses in our community, certainly some probably members of our Chamber of Commerce, that might put some of them out of business. So just letting it be known. And remember that a pre-K certification is an early childhood certification, so teachers would have to have that. So what we're showing you here is sort of what we tried to discuss last year about if we repurposed a school. So we are using Nassau-Kig as an example, not for any other reason than that Nassau-Kig is our current split school. It is one of our lower enrolled schools as well. So what we're trying to demonstrate here, this is, the table shown here is if 6th grade moved out, and kindergarten enrollment appears as the same over the 3 years because, again, it's hard to estimate what that would be. People could say, oh, you could call the hospitals and get the birth rates. That doesn't help. That doesn't mean everyone stays. The hospitals in the area just don't serve Three Village. They serve the entire region. We would think about the students that would go to Jolinas, moving them to Minnesota. and the students that are at Nassaquig that would go to Murphy to move them to Mount. So what this chart shows you is that if Arrowhead and Setauket stayed the same, Minnesota and Mount's enrollments would go up significantly. They are still smaller than they were even 10 years ago on this chart, but in 10 years a lot has changed. We've put in some special education programs at Minnesota and at Nassaquig. The Mount E&L population has grown exponentially. Ms. Galini, I think we're up to about 77, 78 students, over 80 now students at Mount in that program. We also experienced this year at Nassaquig, we wound up in one grade level having 2 sections. As I said, we hoped that that would not happen with our population. We're now down to 2 sections in one grade level. So that limits the choices for a lot of parents. This would certainly increase the number of sections, as you can see, in both of those schools that are available, give more ability to move around some things. We also could talk about revenue from a potential rental of the school, whether that means we move the Three Village Academy out of North Country and move it over there, or we rent the building entirely to another program, whether it's, we speak with BOCES, which we began conversations with them last year to rent some space from us. They turned us down because they didn't like the spaces they wanted. They wanted the whole school. We've been in some conversations with the Stony Brook School down the road here about some space, or the State University, if they wish to come in with space. Open to anything else that anyone would suggest doing. A couple of early childhood education programs we've met with as well about renting space from us. So it's not as if we've sat stagnant on this idea. We've been exploring it as well. Depending on what is planned for the school, the savings would really come from the administration, librarian, nurse, clerical support. The food service workers and lunch monitors, because the students would be going in other buildings, would probably be needed in those other locations. So we estimated, Mr. Carlson, about $1 million roughly saved if we close the school. All right, so that's throwing it out there. I don't want a lot of hate mail from the Nassaquig parents tonight. We're using it as an example, just showing what the possibilities are. There are some folks that would say, well, then if it's going to affect us that way, then redistrict the whole district, so everyone's miserable. So that's another possibility. So that was done a long, long time ago by a superintendent that no longer works here. So I'd really rather not have that happen again. So another idea that we put out there is repurpose the North Country Administrative Center. That's this building. So we house the academy here and all our administrative offices. And prior to the North Country Center being here, the administration of the district was spread out all over the district in different locations, Nichols Road, and portables in several different locations in some buildings. So the thought was we could relocate part of the administration back to Nichols Road. We still own the building there. We house Mesh Track there. We house the BOCES textbook program there. We can move both of those programs to another location somewhere else in the district. The Mount portables are available. There's 4 portables over there. We moved the SAC program into Mount this year. And we could either leave the academy here and rent the building partially or rent the building fully. But we would need to make sure that we have a place for the Three Village Academy. So it is not just left out there to do nothing. This, of course, has less of an impact on the elementary schools. So none of the elementary schools would be impacted, although, as I jokingly said at a meeting earlier today, the only thing is we would probably have to move the administration into one of the lower enrolled elementary schools. I'm hoping some of the elementary principals would welcome us to come to their elementary schools. It would probably have to be Nassaquig or Mount for that to occur, to be able to fit. More likely Nassaquig because it has 2 entrances in and out of that building. Mount only has 1 entrance in. So there may have to be some parking lot configurations. So it's a thought. So I didn't want the community to feel like we're only thinking about closing a school. We're thinking about anything humanly possible to be able to offset some things and perhaps bring in some revenue. It's not going to be a massive amount, a windfall of revenue that will come in. Maybe a few $100,000 if we rent even partially or fully a building to any of those institutions that I mentioned. So, but we want to be transparent about what some of the possibilities could be here. This is definitely a possibility in the long run. So now the big piece for this committee to really look at, and this is the potential why really you're here tonight, because all of that what we just went over is in play already about discussions and will be presented to the board. This last piece just has been brought forward by the Start Time Subcommittee to consider. So there's an acknowledgement that the current start time of the high school, we're one of only 6 schools in the state of New York that have a 7:05 or earlier start time. It's extraordinarily early. There's a lot of studies on sleep deprivation among students and their needs. And what we're examining here is that we might be able to maneuver that times around to accommodate a later start time. It moves the current start time of the high school 35 minutes. This allows for what we heard from the committee last year was that there was a belief that wanting to keep the extra help period and the club period after school. This would allow for a combined period between 2:21 and 3 o'clock when sports starts. So students still could go to extra help / a club and still get to sports. There's not extra help in every class every single day. There's also not clubs. Some clubs meet once a week. Some clubs meet once every 2 weeks. Some clubs meet once every month. There's not a set schedule for all the clubs, over 40 clubs at the high school. One of the elementary schools would have to go earlier, and one of the early elementary schools would have to go on the same schedule with the later elementary schools. So what that does is we currently use 47 buses. We'd have to increase the number of buses by about 8 to accommodate this. So this is what the Start Time Committee went over last week. So the budgetary cost for this, if we were to do this for next year, and this is using this year's prices, the cost of the buses will go up by CPI next year. So that $113,000 will be times by the CPI increase, the same for the $95,000 for the mini. For next year, because we'd still be in our current configuration, we need 12 more buses, 4 minis, 8 large, which comes to about $1.3 million in increase. Again, if this is going in, something has to come out. 9 more buses if we waited 1 more year. So it drops it down. And why is it dropping down particularly? It's because the 9th grade is moved up, and that saves us a bit of money. So it's a significant drop in the about $300,000 to $400,000 in savings by waiting an additional year. What was brought up also at last week's meeting, and we were presenting here tonight, was a request for considering staggered start time. And it was asked if we could present this to this committee to show what that would look like. So presently we have about 180 students that do not attend first period class at Ward Melville High School for a variety of different reasons. And it's not just seniors, it's across 10, 11, and 12. So those parents drive those students to school for second period. For us to try to estimate what that would look like, a staggered schedule, if we've transported these students, it's virtually impossible to figure it out accurately. So if we offered it, we're estimating it would be 10 additional buses. But if it's offered, there could be 300 students that want to do this. There could be 400 students that want this. And any increase in that would increase that transportation cost. You have to remember, too, that the district is 22 square miles. So if we have to have 2 sets of bus runs, that the first bus run going into the high school drops off for all the majority of the students, there's some of those buses that would have to go back out immediately to pick up the kids for the second run to the high school for the second period. So again, this is an estimate, hard to pin down what that would really look like. What this would create would be a 2 to 10 schedule for those students. However, for those students, there might be a loss of their extra help or club time. So if more students wanted to do this, even if it was evenly split, that would be more costly between what we have right now. The later start time, we could do a 7:40 start time. We could do a 0 period, which would be by choice for people that come in early for a 0 period.
They fully lose the 10th period. I'm just trying to do the math. 'Cause right now it's about an hour and 15.
Yeah, there'd still be a little time for something. Not sure exactly, because remember, you have to have a passing time in there built in, so it's not really 41 minutes, it's 45. So, not a total loss. So we said we would bring that to the attention of this committee to review, consider. I wish we could be more accurate with an estimate on this. There is really no way to tell unless we went out and polled all the 11th, 12th, and 9th graders of whether or not they would want to come in later. If any increase of the buses, $1.3 million, once again, if we put $1.3 million minimally for this, if not more, could be less if there's less students interested in it, that amount of money has to come out from somewhere else. So it's another reduction. But it's interesting that both the start time change and the staggered schedule time we're estimating around approximately the same amount of money. So some considerations as we move forward. Planning will continue through the process for the transitions and beyond. Alignment of our programs, as we mentioned. We must always keep in mind with the start time and any other things we do, the required 990 hours for the secondary, 900 hours for the elementary. Remind everyone, once again, passing time, lunch and recess are not included in those numbers. We're not allowed to put them in there. Even the testing days, certain testing days, Regents testing days, whatever we have, also are not fully counted. The big factor is social emotional supports for students impacted by the transition. That's why whatever we do, we have to remember that in 25-26, if the 9th grade moves up and the 6th grade moves up, we would have 2 grade levels going up to the high school at the same time. It would be the 9th grade next year, and the 8th grade next year would be the 9 and 10. And for the junior high schools, the 6 and 7 would really be moving up at the same time. So that we want to make sure that we do the proper thing with supports for any of those transitions. And I think going out and looking at what other schools do, other districts do that are comparable to us with any of that would be important. We have the sophomore orientation in place right now. We would probably need to replicate something like that or exactly like that for the 9th grade coming up at the same time. Major consideration for us is the staff certifications and the shifting of staff. So this is particularly of importance in sciences at the secondary level, about making sure we have the properly certified people to teach the courses that are in place. Phys ed, music, art, health, all are K through 12 certifications, so they're a little easier to maneuver around. But we're supporting that. The 6th grade coming up, as you said, we would have offer to the elementary teachers to come up to be solely that grade level teachers. The repurposing of a school rather than closing it or renting part or all of North Country is another consideration. And we have to remember that 2 secondary classes entering simultaneously, what we need to support with that. So I'm going to try to be quiet and get your thoughts on all of this.
I'll start some. This process has been great, and I thank the board and the administration. We've had 15 months or so worth of very productive discussions in some places, and I can just speak for my own membership. We've engaged in some discussions that have been not always on the same page, a lot of philosophical thoughts about what is best for the district moving forward, or what isn't. And I think that when we began the process, when we started things, it was under the great, let's take a look at this. What can we do differently? Which is what great teaching always is. What went well in this lesson? What didn't go well? And take a look on how we can improve that. And I think it's important for us as a district, a community, for us to always do those types of things. And it spurred as things went along and it evolved, and we got to speak and talk and examine. And like I say, not always be on the same page. I've had heated debates sometimes with colleagues, and I myself have never really landed on which is the right direction for us to go, because anybody that's done research, when we look at these topics, it's not necessarily vetted out in the research. It can come down to child by child in what works best for them. So while the process has been great, it certainly has not always been an easy one. And as I was coming in tonight feeling like we're at the edge, we're at the precipice of let's make a decision, I felt it was really important that we come up with some of the compelling reasons, and I think we would be irresponsible as the governing body here in not having those compelling reasons. Some of the numbers Kevin threw out, and I thought it was 2.6, but $2 million to reconfigure the high school. We're talking 1.3 for the start time, possibly another 1.3 for, if we wanted to do some sort of a staggered schedule instead. And while a lot of that comes outside of the cap, it still does need to be levied. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, that still needs to be levied somehow through a budget process.
The capital project money does, yes.
Yes.
Yes, the transportation money is not outside the cap.
Right. But all of it needs to come from somewhere.
It
So-
all needs to be part of the tax levy. Capital money is, the reason we make that distinction is capital money, while yes, it has to be levied, and it doesn't take the place of something else in the budget.
Right.
Transportation does. That's the
Right.
chief difference. Still has to be paid for.
Gotcha. Right, exactly what I'm coming to. So I just feel like out of all these great discussions and philosophical debates and what is right and what is wrong, and again, it sometimes depends, even for myself, on who I'm talking to. When somebody really makes this great case for we should be this way or that, I just think it's imperative where we're at, whether we're talking about start time or we're talking about a reconfiguration. What we're talking about is really having those compelling reasons for our students, for our community. What are those? And I don't know if anybody shares that feeling or has some of those things, because I think when we walk away and we can present the board with here's how we feel, there's so many options out there. I think whichever direction we're moving in should be reason-based concretely at this point.
I just want to clarify one number. You mentioned 1.3 million on top of 1.3. My understanding is that if we choose either or.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to put out a word of caution about the staggered schedule piece. That is, at best,
A big question.
wild guess.
Yes, I get that.
And
No, I didn't mean
the
it was
180
either or.
students that we have now that don't have a first period class get to school on their own. We don't transport them. So if those same 180 now get transportation, maybe we could do it on 10 buses, right? Maybe. Depends on where they live. If they live scattered all around the whole 22 miles, having 10 buses drive around, pick up one student here, drive another mile and a half, pick up another student, then another 2 miles, pick up another, then they're gonna wind up, yeah, they go to school 45 minutes later, but they're on the bus for an extra
Hour.
40 minutes. So, and if there's an official option of, well, you can take a 1 through 9 schedule or a 2 through 10 schedule, and as Dr. Scanlon mentioned, maybe half the kids say, well, I'll take the 2 to 10 schedule then. And now we have to send buses for all of them. I mean, we might need 20 or 30 buses for them. Absolutely no idea.
Yeah.
So that's the word of caution about the staggered schedule being a feasible option.
And then my question also about the staggered schedule is that, like, a lot of seniors would like to not have first period, but that doesn't always work based on what courses and what supports they need. So even if we say, oh, would you like it or not, it may not always be available to every student based on scheduling, I'm assuming. So I'd prefer personally to see the later start time if it was a one or the other sort of a situation, because then everybody's guaranteed to start later. The staggered start time, I don't know that the students are guaranteed that it will work for them. My concern would also be then, are you going to perhaps have parents saying, well, I want my kid to do periods 1 through 10 and take more electives, and that's like a lovely opportunity, but I don't know that that's like within the budget or part of like an unintended consequence that could end up occurring.
And given the fact that we are a very competitive school district with some very astute academic students that want to take as much as possible, and they don't even want to take lunch most days so they could fit another course in their schedule, which is admirable, not healthy, but admirable. That is a real factor for this district. So they would we have students that are fully scheduled all 3 years at Ward Melville High School. Every single period is occupied. And we have some students that come in late and they want to leave early and they have enough credits and they'll get through and they want to just get their time and move on with their life. We have that as well, so.
It's not an unknown commodity on this committee where I stand on a lot of things, certainly. But I appreciate what you're saying, very much so. And when considering the whole bevy of things that we've looked at, the one thing that I can certainly say, having been on the start time committee, is that there is data for the start time piece. So there's data we can go back to the community and say, there is a lot of outside information about helping our students. Now, I cannot say that about the 6 and 9 move. which is why I have consistently been against it, even when we voted against it. But the Start Time Committee is a little different.
You voted for it. No, you did voted against
Oh, no, I
it.
didn't.
You voted against it. Everyone else voted for
That's
it.
right. You know, and I think that if we're going to continue to push the 6 and 9 move, which we did, I still don't see the compelling reasons. I see the compelling reasons on the Start Time, either the staggered or the other one. You know, I could make a good argument, and people at the Start Time Committee made very good arguments for it. I still haven't seen it, and I've had people express that to me in the community. Why are we going through this?
One thing I just want to point out about when Dr. Scanlon mentioned, we would have one more elementary school on the late schedule. It may be, right now, Minnesota and Nascaga are the early of the 5 elementaries. It may be one of those becomes a late school. It may be both of them. Logistically, when we have to do all the routes and figure it all out, it's possible that one of the 3 late schools, Arrowhead, Setauket, or Mount, becomes an early school, and both Nascaga and Minnesota become late schools. And I just want to make sure everybody, before they make a decision on how they're going to vote on something, knows that, just to keep in mind that, as you mentioned, there's a lot of data that says, yes, the later start time is better. My guess is that not every single person, parent and staff member at Minnesota and Nascaga would agree with that. And in 2010, Arrowhead, Setauket, and Mount were pushed back 10 minutes. They used to dismiss at 3:30. Now it's 3:40. Eric, you were at, it did not go over well.
It still does not go.
It was 10 minutes. And I'm not saying as a reason it shouldn't be done. That's not, but you know, our job is to make sure you're aware of everything. And that was 10 minutes, and people were not happy with it. This would be at least one of those 2 early schools now being 42 minutes later, just so everybody knows. So no one can say later, well, you didn't mention that, that might not be popular, but so, just so everyone knows.
Because it involves transportation, does this go as a separate proposition for the budget, or does it get put in together?
Yes, we discussed that at the meeting the other day. I asked Jeff, and he can respond.
It does not have to go as a separate, it certainly could. But it does not require, it doesn't change the distance. The only thing that has to be voted on by the public is the distances that students are eligible for. This has nothing to do with that. This is just changing the start and ending times at the schools. If there was, because there might be a question, what if there were a separate proposition which included the dollar amount for transportation? Well, if the dollar, let's say we put the budget together, right? And it does not include the additional transportation money, right? And then as a separate proposition, we said, okay, do you want the budget to be increased by another $1.3 million in order to make the start time change? If that 1.3 million would then make the budget, the tax levy combined, go over the cap, meaning it needs the 60%, both pieces need the 60%. It's not a matter of, well, the budget passed without it, but the additional referendum failed. Even the budget piece would need the 60%. It doesn't make any sense. Logically, you would say, well, why would it? Well, it does. And there have been. Unless the total package stayed below the cap, exactly, yes.
Which
So-
would. Right,
Well, that way, if the referendum, the separate referendum piece of it failed, it wouldn't make the budget fail.
But I caution us again, whatever we put in with a tax, $1.3 million somewhere else has to come out. So, and the majority of our budget is staffing. So I've heard a lot about people with opinions of, well, there's too many administrators, cut them down. Well, tell me who's doing their jobs. I've heard there's too many teachers, cut them down. Well, we have class size averages that we are supposed to keep into effect. If we violate those, we'll be putting them back in, because we definitely would get grieved on those sizes. And there's a logic piece to that too, that class sizes we want to keep down, because that means the instruction directly of students in classrooms. It was even said in this room at that last committee that the instructional is basically sacrosanct and we shouldn't be touching that multiple times by multiple people. So if that's the case, and we truly believe that, and I truly believe that, we should be keeping that sacrosanct and not touching that. In fact, I could make the argument that we should even lower class sizes even more than they are right now. We have class sizes in our contract that are left over from the 1990s, so that really need to be adjusted according to what our issues and needs are today, as opposed to 30 years ago.
Jeff, can I just go off of what you just said about the 2 elementary schools real quickly too? And this will be anecdotal, so I don't have data to support it, but we have for years lost teachers at the 3 later schools as soon as there's an opportunity to go to the earlier school, just for their own lives, their own families. Yeah. It's late. 3:40 is late. And also anecdotally, we have students who leave school on a regular basis for Irish step dance every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, or gymnastics. I just can't get them in any other class, and every Monday they'll be leaving at 2:50. So to move 4 schools into that zone, we may anecdotally be losing out on instruction for students. You know,
Right,
and staff who, it's a hardship. Not, you know, they have a job to do, and that's not, but it is a hardship that it gets later.
Well, I think there's financial things that we have to consider, and also I see the data and I see the importance of a lot of these different things happening. I think the one ironic thing we have to look at is the timing of it all. Because if you look at, you know, when you start to play it out, and as I sit here as a principal and I sit here as a parent of a student at Nassakeg, I will tell you that, you know, my son's in 3rd grade this year. 2 years from now, he'll be in 5th grade. If we end up in a place where we are closing Nassakeg, next year he could end up at a building where he hasn't been before, or no, next year he would end up in a building where his time of his day totally changes, and all the stuff that he does after school now has to get jammed into even less time. Then the following year, he would have to go to an entirely different school for 5th grade, and then another year, he would go to Jolinas. So it really becomes like, when we look at the timing of all of it, I think we have to just, although I think all of these things compartmentalized make a lot of sense, and there are a lot of important pieces to it, I think we have to look at how they work together, because if we don't put them together and put the pieces of the puzzle together, we're gonna end up having it crumble in before us. And I think that's important to think about, and I don't want to discredit the start time or the timing of it. I just think that it's a lot to put on families and kids and changing of schedules and all of these different things without really looking at, when we look at what if we're moving to 6 and 9 and that's where we're going, and we want to look at start time, I'm not opposed to that. I just think that when you look at the effect it has and you start to look at the different compartmentalizes, and we could look at every school and every grade level, and every parent could probably find 10 other ways that it'll affect their family and their dynamic, and we have to consider that and try to, I guess, meet the masses where they are.
Which I think, Corinne, leads to the conversation of, other than for the group of students right now who would certainly benefit based on the information that they go to school later, does it outweigh the idea of putting it all together into the same year, so that all the changes happen at the same time? And the transitions and it really makes a lot more sense than to try to do that major change and then another major change, again, at the loss of this group of students who would lose out on the 40 minutes. But in the scheme of things, I would recommend, or my vote would be for all those changes to happen at the same time.
Do we have a sense if we postponed, and I know Barbara's watching right now, she's gonna fire something at me, but do we have a sense, if we didn't do the start time next year, but did wait for it to be all at once, what the difference in the added expense would be?
Yes, so we had that on the.
That was,
Yes.
so it's
about
300?
300 and change.
It's about, yeah, a little bit.
Saves.
Right.
Not bad, yeah.
By waiting the extra year, it saves 300, okay.
Yeah.
And change.
Well, technically, it saves
It saves
1.2 million next year,
million next year,
Well-
and then it saves 300,000 the
Well,
following
doesn't-
year.
well, it doesn't.
Well, then the following year, instead of costing
Right.
1.3, it costs 900. Well, by then it'll be about $1 million.
And if we're at that point, if we are going to repurpose a building, you've then absorbed most of that cost right there by repurposing. If we repurpose an elementary school, and that was the question I was going to ask, the repurposing of North Country, how much, you estimated about $1 million for the elementary school. Would we get that same savings from North Country, or is it significantly less?
It's significantly less, because you're talking about a rental of a building, and it's not going to be millions of dollars per month. And I know there's probably real estate brokers out there saying, well, we'll buy it from you. No, we have covenants on most of our buildings that we can't sell them off like they're just, chattel out there, including the Hawkins Road property, which we have 18 acres down there. There's a covenant on that. We just can't sell the property off. If we go to do anything with it other than an educational purpose, it reverts to the town. So we also have reserve off of Mount. There's 40 acres there. That was where the 3rd junior high school was supposed to go. Same concept. We can't just sell off the land. There are a lot of folks that would love to see us sell it off and build huge housing developments, and they make the millions off of it. There's a lot of downside to that as well.
Not me, I'm in Mount.
Is there a cost out there? Has anybody looked at what it would be to move what the operations that are in here to somewhere else? I mean, that would be a significant
Yeah, we're very
upfront
early in the
cost.
discussion of that. We would certainly, we don't want to necessarily say like we don't need a lot of space, but we would need space in whatever school it would be. We could certainly tighten up some of our offices instead of having some of the larger offices that we have in some of the locations, and some of our conference room spaces. The bigger factor is the where do we go in which elementary school? Like, what does that do to that school, and what does it take away from them as well? That's a major consideration.
There's a lot of people that work here.
Yes, but by splitting us up, putting some of the administration over at the Nichols Road building saves some of that. So that may be about 1/3 of the building. The other 2/3 would be over at an elementary school.
So what I hear is that these other plans are still in the working. There's no guarantee that it will work out next year. What's sure is science is undebatable. The start time affects children's efficiency of study. I don't think we need to ever doubt. And the school did a lot of good surveys. I suggest everybody to read the data. And the early risers, only 3%. This is from the data that students filled in, parents filled in, right, teacher, staff. That means, the notion that only small percentage of the children have this problem, that's not incorrect. 97% of the kids, not early riser. And they sleep, high school students sleep only 6 hours a day. So besides all the discussion of money today, which I appreciate, right? Budget is important too, we are all taxpayers, but we are the adults in the room making decisions for those who are not in the room. So we need to keep that in mind. And it's overdue. The start time is not something that we should compromise. To me, $1.3 million is not small, but compared to $220 million, the percentage is that we can never find savings from somewhere. And to delay a year, it's not saving money. It's just spend less, in 2025. And we don't know the money that year is going to be 900 or not. And what Jeff said is very well, right? There are more options out there that we haven't spent time yet. Maybe we can optimize more to see if we can spend less than $1.3 million. I just feel like, as a representative for the parents, that I have to remind everybody, consider that. I think today we should vote, should we support this or not, but not talking about money. There is a budget committee, BAC, right, advisor committee, let them do their work to look at the old budget.
It's kind of hard to vote for it if we don't know where the money's going to come from and pay for it. Like, what are we giving to get? I don't know how we vote on something like that.
Well,
Unless it's philosophical vote, in which case I think most
I think we have to trust the administrator to present a budget that take those, in the best interest of the whole school district.
And I do think that it's definitely a priority, the changing the start time. So I would like to see that happen for next year. I understand the logistics might work out for some families to be nicer if there's less transition, but we're talking about like Irish step class as opposed to children's cognitive function when they're taking AP and Regents and classes that are going on their college transcripts. So as much as that might be inconvenient, if you used to be an early start time and now you're a late start time, well, I've always been a late start time kid at Arrowhead, so, you know, we figured it out. And we were able to make it work, and I just feel like the priority of all of the research behind there being a later start time, I feel like that needs to happen as soon as possible. It should have happened earlier. That to me is priority, but I do think that when we are looking at transitions, if we did the start time now and didn't move the other transitions, I think we do have to look at the big picture and how many kids are going through how many transitions. So if Nesacag was ever going to be repurposed, then maybe their start time isn't the one that gets moved right now. Like whatever we could do, I think, to mitigate the amount of changes individual families are going through should definitely be something that's important.
Can I just jump back to my Irish step dancing, which, by the way, I love?
Yeah, I also love Irish
I
step
just want to make the
dancing.
point that I want to see the bigger picture, and I am still of the mindset that the Princeton model should still be on the table, and the reason it fell was because somehow within 2 days it was linked to Nasacay closing, and parents shot it completely down. And I would be very concerned that 2 schools who are now going to a later time are going to have negative feelings about a budget and say, oh, we can vote it down and then it won't, then that won't happen. So I bring it up just to make sure everyone is aware that even at the elementary school, there's a lot going on in the 3 to 6. I mean, I've got elementary kids who come home from basketball at 9:30. So we've got like bigger problems as a society of what we're trying to squeeze into a 24-hour day. But I bring it up, the only reason I brought it up was people will be affected by it, and it will affect their decision-making as a whole.
So I believe when we started this venture, and laughably Jeff just opened his book and said, no, we would, back at this table, we started October 19th of 2022. It's been a little over a year now, looking at all this stuff. The reason why we did all this, and it's not because there isn't data that backs it up, there's absolutely information that is out there that our present configuration is an archaic system that's been left over from the 1950s and 60s. And it's not because, we're not in this system because we didn't want to change, it's because we couldn't change because of size. It was attempted minimally 3 times in the past, and we simply just could not fit the students from the 9th grade at Ward Melville High School. It would have been, back then, the high school had over 2,000 students in it, and 3 less wings. So it's not a factor of that. The idea is that whatever we do, everyone's going to be impacted by any change we do. No one's not going to be impacted at some point in time. What we're trying to do is minimize that as much as possible. And when we talk about things, particularly it's been brought up multiple times about the social emotional component of this. Do you want to keep kids as young as possible, keep them in the 6th grade, and keep them in elementary school? You talk to some of the elementary teachers, they would tell you the 6th graders are ready to go probably before they even start 6th grade. They need to flee as soon as possible. If we are comparing ourselves, which whether we do that internally in this committee or not, or whether the community does it as well, we are compared to other schools in the country and in our state that are configured different than we are. I, having taught at Ward Melville High School and taught the 10th grade curriculum in social studies, always contended that it's so difficult to get students from 2 different buildings coming into us for a 2-year curriculum and trying to coordinate what was done in both places. We managed to do it because the professionals that we are as teachers and administrators in the district going back many, many years managed to do that on a daily basis. But it was not without a lot of angst in that process. The honest to God fact is that the state is doing everything in its power to push us into models of P5, 6, 8, 9, 12. All the Blue Ribbon Commission information that we have, this 12 recommendations, talks about that model. We are an outlier, an extreme outlier. Does not mean that what we're doing is terrible. We have wonderful results in this district. I would put them up against other districts as well. It doesn't mean that other districts that are configured differently are better than us because they're configured differently. It does not mean that at all. We have to figure out what's best for our community. This survey, I hate going back to time, before everyone forgets, we didn't try to mince anything with anybody. We put out exactly this. The community spoke about what they preferred. Doesn't mean that they like it or not. Overall, this is what they preferred over the others, given all these different factors. And remember, when we put out that survey, we also gave them a chart at the bottom of which districts are configured in each of these ways. I agree with Eric, the Princeton model serves a lot of different purposes. There were very few districts that were in that model. There was certainly much less in the option C. I think there was only like 3 districts in that option. But there are more in the B option, the vast majority in the B option of that. So what that means for us is that when we think about a student's educational experience, they're having a different experience than their counterparts in other districts because of our configuration. For 6th graders, and we could talk about FLES and what that could look like, for 6th graders in our district, as competitive as we are, not to have a language option is definitely putting them at a disadvantage. And we still have language department in this district exceeds the results on the CERC exams, the national tests. They do a phenomenal job. But if they had one more year, how many more kids would we have in AP? How many more kids would take a second language? That's a possibility. But everything we're going to do, no matter what we look at in this district, as much as we are a school district, we are affected by money. And since the inception of the tax cap, it is even more prevalent now. This is not the days of the late 1990s when this district was doing double-digit increases in tax spending and taxes went out of control and people were upset. It's not those days anymore, folks. And while some of us in education may disagree with the tax cap, the vast majority of New Yorkers are very much in favor of it because we're one of the highest tax states in the country. And school taxes being put into property taxes really is something that kills us. I could go on for several hours about that and make campaign speeches, but that's the way our model is configured. There's infinitely different steps that we can be taken, what other states have done to support schools, not doing property taxes, but New York hasn't gotten there yet.
And I think, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
No.
but before we moved on, I think it's important, and I think that's why I wanted to raise this, that there are price tags to all of these things. And when we did this survey, it was very much unknown. We were so early on in the process. Was this going to be something that saved us money? Was it going to be something kind of left things flat and we could change things up? Or as we're at now we're in the, if we're doing both of these 6 through 9 move and a start time move, I just think it's important. And we don't always do things because it costs more money or less money, but it is a factor. And you've kind of hammered that home tonight that something needs to come out of there. So
That's
I think as a committee, us understanding that we're making either one of these or both of these, or if we've already made one and then we're talking about the other, all of it is money. So it does need to, where's the trade-off and what are we doing to make ends meet? And, selfishly, I represent the teachers. We're a go-to. So it's hard for me to sit and, I know what the easy cuts are, and I know how those affect children.
Right.
And learning, and, when you speak about the greatness of the district, we stack up in our current configuration with the current start time better than most. And I think we should be proud of that, and hold on to those things.
Absolutely.
We do a great job where we're at.
We
Not
do.
to say we don't have room for improvement, or
Yes.
there's room for changes.
And I would only contend is that, I'm not saying that 9th grade moving is going to make us even better, but it's going to at least give our students an opportunity, particularly in 6th grade, forget about even 9th grade move, that other school districts, students in other school districts have experience with, and we don't. Our students don't. But I want to point out to this document I gave you from the Suffolk County School Superintendents Association. So you as taxpayers, whether you're watching at home right now or in this room, you should be really aware about where your tax dollars are going, because while you believe that your majority of your tax dollars are supporting just 3 Village, it's not. You're supporting other parts of the state that are not giving their fair share, or at least in my opinion, of their tax dollars to our educational system. So we are helping fund New York City, and we're helping fund a lot of upstate districts on the downstate level. And when we look at our population decline, going way back to those charts at the very beginning here, it's sort of it's understandable that our population is going down because people can afford to stay on Long Island or on the downstate side of New York because of what's going on. It's not just a Long Island thing. Westchester County is experiencing similar circumstances, and it's because this district is listed as a high wealth district. Regardless of our percentage of free and reduced lunch, we are a high wealth district. And we're looked upon as we we can give more, and we don't get as much back. So our state aid last year alone, with that, when you pull out that $1.4 million for pre-K, which was a total, let's play the news media as best, show them how much they're really getting. But by the way, if you look at the asterisk, that's only if they have a UPK program. That was just false advertising. It was misleading to communities. When it came down to it, was $900 and some odd thousand when we're all said and done. For a district this size, our size and our capability, we should be receiving a lot more. So this last page of that packet really gives you a good indication about what that looks like for Long Island. And if you're not mad about it, you should be. And if you haven't spoken up about it, you should be. And you should not just be yelling in a well. You should be calling Albany, and you should be calling, saying, where is our funding coming from? It's on the backs of our community where we don't have a large commercial base in Three Village. So we're not like a Hop Hog or some other districts that are that have those things. It's on house taxes, taxes for people that own homes in the community. So it's just something that we need to be consistently aware of. And I wouldn't have gone to this position as superintendent and put this forward as one of the first initiatives out there if I didn't believe that we need to do something. Because if our population starts to level off and if it's in the 5,000 some odd student range, that's great, but we were bigger. And all I can tell you is I see the registrar's office every single day because it's in this building. How many people come in here and how many people come in with single children or two children, and how many people transfer into us at much later times in their child's educational experience. And I see the number of students that Ms. Galini sees, coming into our specialized programs, particularly in E&L, that we're attracting. We're a victim of our own success. We have a very successful special education program. We have a very special E&L program. We do a lot of things above and beyond what a lot of other districts do. And to say that we shouldn't do those, that just doesn't fly. So, if we're going to cut down to the bare minimum, all right, then let's cut out all the AP courses. Let's cut out all the art courses, all the music courses, all the honors classes, because they're not required to do any of that now at certain levels. Now, but that's what makes Three Village special. That's what makes us unique. It's wonderful that we have kids in third grade in orchestra and hopefully in band in another year. So those are the things that make us unique. We have a very, very eclectic community here. But we also have to be cognizant of it's very expensive to live in Three Village. And while we have a very senior teaching staff, that may not be for that long. We have 117 teachers out of 500 and some odd in the next 4 years that are up for retirement. That's potential brain drain for us, but it's also a cost savings for us overall because every one of those teachers retiring probably will save us between $100,000 and $113,000 per teacher going out, even if we replace them one for one. So there's a lot of, you are definitely at the cusp of something. You are correct, Mr. Pickford, with that. We are at the cusp of, we are definitely different than we were from a demographic standpoint, and we need to plan for a future that none of us in this room at this point in time can truly predict. And I will agree with several of the folks in the room. It's very hard to argue with the data about start time. The data is inexplicable that it is late. In the game. We're late in the game and even analyzing this. The committee that started in 2019 only got sidetracked because of COVID. Then it was nothing more than that. We brought it back, and I fully recognize that at one of our first meetings that start time is a major health issue for us, and that is not going to go away. At the same time, though, at last week's meeting in this room, I did reiterate one more time that it takes the cooperation of the school and the parental community together to address the issue. If we move start time later, that does not mean that kids should be staying up a half an hour later. There should be a bedtime. I don't care if they're 5 years old or 18 years of age. The phones have got to go off. The computers have to shut down. And otherwise, everything we're doing is for naught. Because if they're up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I will tell you right now, we have the data on our Chromebooks that we track, that they're up at 2 o'clock in the morning, they're up at 3 o'clock in the morning, still doing stuff, and it's not schoolwork, it's other stuff with their machines, and that is a problem. It's a problem of our society. It's not just a Three Village problem, it's a problem of society. These lovely little devices that we're all hooked on and can't stop looking at even in the course of an hour and 15-minute meeting, whether here or at home, these are an extra appendage now, kids are worse. There are addiction studies on these devices. It is far worse for the younger you are than it is for even us as adults. So we're training them to be like this. So we need to be cognizant of that. That's why we had another committee, a cell phone committee, looking at that issue. I feel like I've been committed to death in the past year and a half, but we are trying to address a lot of issues that are all intertied together. And I completely agree with Ms. Keene, is that no one of these things on its own can be dealt with. It has to be dealt with in its totality, hence why we did this whole process.
Yeah, so, you know, with the theme of something has to come out for something else to go in, you know, as the teachers union, we have concerns because we know that some of the best time that the students spend in the building is with teachers. So when sometimes we don't love to see, like, all right, we're going to be trading buses for staff, and we love that pupil-to-student ratio. And that's another part that's a huge part of their social emotional learning in the school, is interacting with different adults and different disciplines, and, you know, maybe jumping out of a, you know, a bubble they might have been in into a new class or something like that. So we have concerns with that.
Kevin, I feel a little bit like a kid that didn't do their homework, so I apologize, but I'm still not seeing data on the site, on the website, about how 35 minutes, what type of data that shows us as far as improvement in academic performance, but more importantly, health. I know that's really what we're looking at.
Right.
That much time, is the data going to be out there for that much time?
So we
how
can
much
share
improvement we're
some of
gonna
the
see?
studies that were brought up with the start time subcommittee. Ideally, if you look at some of those studies, that really isn't enough. That's a beginning, but it's not enough. What the studies are really showing is a 9 o'clock, or really anything past 8 o'clock. There was a movement at the state level to have a universal beginning of the day. That's sort of been stuck in the muck and mire up there. So we're not really sure. California did do that. The entire state of California picked a start time. I don't recall exactly what the time was. Does anyone remember what that California time was?
I think they follow the recommended after 8:30.
8:30, yeah. So it
It
was,
started, actually, I have friends in California, they said, you know, it's a big difference.
yeah, I'm sure.
Of course, that's anecdotal. I'm sure there will be researchers, you know, collect data and publish comparison, you know, once they implement a year or two.
Right. One of the pieces that I will tell you is that the literature that's given to us by one of the leading experts, which we brought into the district to speak with us, states that to get to the system that we have now with the multi-tiered bus system, saved money. There's no doubt in that. And Mr. Carlson can attest to how much, you know, with the efficiency study on that one.
I think I have the,
So,
that brochure.
but in that brochure itself, it also says, in order to go back to that, it's going to cost money to do that. So, and the factor is that, you know, I understand where the teachers union comes from as well. Like, the perception is our biggest part of our budget is staffing. You know, we're contending that we can't cut any more of our teachers in order to get to that number. I would also contend that cutting administration, we could look at that, but you know, we're operating with a very small administrative team that operates our district, and we're able to give services that a lot of other places are not able to do, and seeing some of the work that's done on a daily basis. There are people who say there's too many central office administrators. Okay, anyone that wants to come up here, walk the hall with me and tell me who should I get rid of, because then you can tell me who's going to do the job. So that's just a contention. So where else is it going to come from is what we have to ask. If anyone's won the lottery out there, let us know. If you want to make a big donation, we will be happy to take it.
I do teach at a 705 district as well, and I can tell you for the first 2 periods of the day, it's sleepy time. It is difficult. All right. I was wondering if the recommendation of the committee could be a contingent recommendation.
Of course.
Could we recommend that the start time be put forward contingent on the board budget committee not eliminating any staff?
You can certainly put that forward.
I mean, that might be a compromise position where the committee could come to, where we would say, yes, we want to make this happen, but only if these things come into place. If not, then it's got to be pushed down the line.
So it was just, I get to circle us back a little. So The 6 and 9 moving up is done. Ship has sailed, right? That's fait accompli. Tonight, it's really looking at the information from the Start Time Committee and saying, yes, we believe, Board of Education, you should do this next year, or yes, we believe you should do this in 2 years, or no, we don't believe you should do it at all. And then, of course, any contingencies that you would want to attach to that. So eventually, it's going to have to come down to us actually raising hands and voting on that. So last minute thoughts.
And that's why she's board president.
I'm just not sure we can make a contingent, like, we could definitely make a contingent, but, like, as far as no staff members, like, that's like a really, like, specific contingent, because are we talking custodial staff, are we? I'm not saying we should get rid of custodial staff, but I'm just saying,
Right.
if we look at the needs and the down enrollment, I don't want to see teachers' positions cut. I just don't, as far as a staff member cut, I feel like that's a really big contingent.
Right.
But I definitely don't want the cuts to come from the teaching staff, because I want the smaller class size, and I want the electives, and I want the AP classes, and I want the strong art and music program. I mean, my son's a high school senior, and his college choices that he's looking at are ones where there's a 13-to-1 faculty to student ratio. Like, that is definitely a priority to my family, and I see as a teacher myself what an impact it makes when if I have 15 kids or 27 kids. It's like humongous night and day difference. And I think that's in the best interest of the teachers and the students and the community. And that's it's not like a teacher issue versus everybody else. It's the teacher, the staffing really impacts the students and the community so very much. But I think we'd have to just word a contingency carefully.
I agree. And just to give an example, this is not to say, so if anyone's watching at home or even thinking in this room, that we're not willing to make compromises in other areas. So I'll give an example. When we did our search for PPS director, executive director, or assistant to the superintendent, we had 2 people in contention for the position. Both turned us down. We looked around. We found someone internally. We reconfigured that person's former position and saved us $100,000 and some odd thousand. We will continue to do that, regardless, or even with the input of the BAC, or regardless of the input from the BAC. We are doing that anyway. We don't need anyone else telling us that we should be doing that. We do that anyway. We have potentially retirements among some of our administrative staff this year. We will look to see what cost savings we can save there. As I mentioned, if we get any retirements from any of the units, whatever cost savings there will also be done to assist us. We're looking at other things that we may be able to do with our units to see if there's ways we can encourage more people to potentially think about retiring, or if they passed over incentives to retire, to rethink about that again. So we're constantly doing those type of things. And I'm going to just say this. I am blessed with knowing a lot of people in my life, but I'm going to count the gentleman to my right. Not that I don't discount the gentleman to my left over there either. To my right, Mr. Carlson, because of his years of experience in doing this job. He's one of the leading experts in the business world of education on Long Island. If we did not have his expertise, we'd be kind of lost. There's not a day that goes by that I don't look to him for advice or consideration on things. He is constantly looking at new ideas, innovative ideas, and thinking about ways we could address things. So he's a strong advocate for saving us money as often as possible so that we can keep ourselves afloat. Ideally, last year, we would never have wanted to cut the number of people we had to cut. It was out of sheer necessity because of the circumstances of our budget. We keep reminding everyone that you failed the budget 2 years, that we're still feeling the impact of that. And that we're going to continue. That money is gone forever. It's gone. So we're never going to get it back. So we got to think of other ways that we can come up with ways to do that. Renting a building, partially or fully, or reconfiguring or repurposing a building partially or fully, saves us some money that we can utilize to offset some of the costs that we're anticipating. It's a fact of what we're dealing with. And I have to remind everyone, too, that this district has gone through an ebb and flow. There was a time when we had, this building was an elementary school. We had the Christian Avenue School. There were 7 elementary schools in here. Hawkins Road, as I said, was supposed to be the 8th elementary school. They simply ran out of money in 1966 to build one. They ran out of money to build a second high school. There was supposed to be 2 high schools here, a North High School and an East High School, which is Ward Melville. The North High School land was sold off years ago, and houses are on it now. Christian Avenue School was closed, burnt down. The property now is all schools over there. This old Setauket High School, which sat up on Chicken Hill, that went away many, many years ago. I know there's people from the Historical Society that are going to send me information on that one. I sat at that lecture that night and heard the whole thing about how that existed. So I've been told by people, you should combine with another district. We already combined. That's what a central school district means. We're 3 village school district because it's 3 school districts that came together: Setauket, East Setauket, and Stony Brook. We've done that. Some folks have said we should, merge with Port Jeff. I don't know if Port Jeff would want to merge with us. And also, and we have to consider some of those things, what that would look like too. All these things are out there, being floated around as considerations, but it's not for lack of trying. So I don't want the community to feel that anyone in administration or the staff, and I'm very, very blessed to have all the different teachers and representatives, and Brian is exactly right. We sat in a lot of these meetings, some of them became contentious, but there's a difference between discord and discourse. A healthy discourse is fine. When it's discord and people are going out and trying to stab people in the back and sabotage or demean or ridicule, that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to take a very logical, professional examination of our circumstances that we're living in right now in this district, and pray that for our future we're building a district that our children's children will be able to come back to and live in and afford to live in someday, and not have to contend with some of the situations we're dealing with right now.
So forgive me then, Kevin and Sue, if I may circle back also. I heard you just say, Sue, that this is moving, the 6 and 9 piece is moving forward. So
To the
what is,
board,
to the board for a
yes.
presentation on Wednesday for a vote and decision. So may I ask what it is you're looking exactly from us right now? Is it simply the time, the start
Yeah.
time piece?
So
Okay.
when we're ready, my first question would be, do you accept the recommendations from the start time committee? Should we change the start time, yes or no? Then from there, it's gonna be, do you want to do that next year? Or do you want to do that the year after, 25, 26? So we'll call that vote whenever anybody's ready, but if anybody has any other things you wanna say first, now is the time.
Well, the only thing I want to say is, I did not know that that was definitive as the presentation to the board on Wednesday. I sort of felt like that's where we were all heading, but knowing that this is, if not next year, but the 25, 26 school year, I am of the opinion that as much as I would like this to be a healthy experience for kids, I hear Mrs. Keene loud and clear that there's a lot going on in this district, and I would lean towards the recommendation that it all happen at the same time. That's where my vote's gonna end up right now.
So do we feel ready to vote? Nod, yeah, okay. All right, so let's just do it the easy way first. Are you in favor of accepting the start time committee's recommendations to move the start time later? Show of hands for yes. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes. Yes, sorry. Keep your hands up for me if you would on that side. 10, 11, 12, 13, okay. And how many are not in favor of making the start time later? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so yes, the start time, we are in favor of making that later. So, that being said, that is the consensus. Who would like to change it next year? Your choices are gonna be next year or the year after. So who would like to change it next year? And keep your hands up so I can count, please. 1, 2, 3. Okay, who is in favor of changing it? And remember, it is going to be changed, so please vote. Who is in favor of changing it for 25, 26? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, there you go, 13 and 13. So yes, the start time will change. Jade, I see you breathing.
May I just say, Sue, I'm sorry, could you just clarify one thing for me? This group.
Well, board has to vote, yes, but
I
from
was
this
gonna
committee.
say, yeah,
no,
this
no,
group
but
did not just make that
this-
decision,
The
did we?
consensus of this committee.
Because let's bring some more to the table then, Sue.
The
Let's do-
consensus of this committee is that yes. That's right. Yes,
My
we
name is
wanted
gonna
to
end
change.
up on some
We
presentation
recommended
like that.
changing, and we do not recommend it changing 24, 25. We recommended changing 25, 26. So that's what's going to go to the Board of Education.
So so all committees in the district are recommending bodies to the superintendent, and then from the superintendent to the Board of Education. So the recommendation I'll put forward to the Board of Education next week. This presentation that we showed you tonight will be modified to reflect that recommendation to the Board of Education. Ultimately, even if, since we were down one board member, it's still we need 4 board members to say yes to that change. So that's where we come from. So what we're presenting is the totality of this report, including this is what it's going to cost us for the for the high school. And I just want to remind everyone, we may want to put this in the slide too, is that we currently are at $1.4 million. And if it is, like Mr. Pickford said, if it's 2.6, it's really in the 2-ish range. And John Grillo is one of is our architect, and he gave us a range between 2 and 2.5. It's in that range. It could be less, it could be more, depending on what we're doing. So the difference between the 1.4 and that 2 whatever is what it would cost us, because the 1.4 is already in the budget. So it's just the increase of that. So it's not another $1 million, it's not 2.4 million more. It's whatever from the 1.4
differences,
up.
yeah. And just to clarify dates, so this is going to be presented to the board,
Next
At-
Wednesday.
right, at our
Right.
next meeting,
So
and then
it-
voted upon
In first meeting in January.
January. Okay.
So this allows the community over their holiday break. We wanted to give you just something to talk about over the holidays while you're on vacation, to think about as everything's going on. So we need time for the community to be prepared for that and read that. All of the information, as much as transparent as possible, we're going to put on our website. A lot of this is already there. If you have any questions about anything, if anyone at home watching has any questions, please email us. We'll be happy to respond to anything that you have as far as concerns or comments.
So I voted for the wrong one, but they changed me to the other one. I thought I got confused.
2025, not 2024.
Okay, so that's a 2 and a 14. Got it. Thank you.
Okay. You want to adjourn us?
Okay, anything else from anybody this evening? All right, well, thank you all so very much for all of your work and effort, and I wish you all a very happy holiday. Have a good night.
Happy Hanukkah, yes.